Hello and welcome to Claim to Game. I'm your friend, host, and honorary game noob, Clint.scheirer. Together we'll learn new games, mainly tabletop role-playing games, step by step. Today's episode is simply exploring the pre-made game setting of the Great Battle Camp, identifying what creatures inhabit this space, and shooting the breeze about how this pre-made setting can help folks jump right into the fun of Goblin Quest. Hello, and welcome back to Episode 3, Season 1 of Claim to Game, a predominantly educational, fun podcast. Fun-educational, just like those learning games back in the 90s, but better. Math Blasters, circa 1993. I remember my mom was like, hey, let's try to get some learning in this kid's head when he really wants to do what he really wants to do, which is play video games all day long. And it wasn't fun. I have never yet played a fun educational game. Maybe there was a game with Mario doing surfing on a time machine, but that's probably the only one I remember. If you have a fun educational learning game in the 90s that you actually liked, feel free to shoot me an email and let me know what it is. I might even talk about it on one of our next episodes. You can shoot me an email at clint.scheirer@claimtogamepodcast.com. But that's not why you're here. You're here to systematically learn how to play a new tabletop role-playing game, one game at a time. And if this is your first time tuning in, our game this season is Goblin Quest, the RPG, brought to you by game designer Grant Howitt, whose works include, but are not limited to, Honey Heist, Die the RPG, Spire, Unbound, One Last Job, Heart, and most recently, at the time of this recording, Eat the Reich. But right now, we ain't eating no Reich. We are going to eat up the setting and the critters and creatures who inhabit the Great Battle Camp. Now, the setting was actually both a tender and a tough during my last episode. It was a tender because the setting makes it very easy and playable for the game to be started right out of the box, but it's also a tough because it's pre-made. A pre-made setting requires at least a minimal amount of reading by both the GM as well as the players to be able to convey what is happening in this setting and get things started. So first, what is the Great Battle Camp? It is a very Mordor-esque feel, a very tokeny, dark land where fell things creep kind of wasteland. It plays to some very common fantasy tropes to help those who enjoy epic fantasy or who have read Lord of the Rings or any sort of Tolkien-like fantasy to hop into the game quicker because it's familiar to them. The first page that talks about the Great Battle Camp is page 7 of the Goblin Quest RPG book. Remember, if you do want a copy of this book, you can click on the link in the show notes to get your own copy and follow along. That is an affiliate link, so I may earn commission if you do choose to purchase your copy through that link, but at no extra cost to you. The idea is that the setting really plays on the short lifespan of the goblins. It says that the Great Battle Camp was built 7 years ago in ancient history. So for somebody or like a goblin who only lives about a week for their lifespan, 7 years would feel like a very long time. There's also a pre-made conflict between the realm of darkness versus the armies of good. Now, the armies of good aren't really fleshed out in the book, in the reading. There's not really much said about them other than it consists of humans, gnomes, and dwarves. The realm of darkness, we're going to get into everybody who lives there, which includes the goblins and really everybody under the control of the wizards. That's their domain. The realm of darkness is controlled by wizards. They are the big bad evil guys, the BBEGs of this campaign, this game. They are equivalent in the eyes of the goblins to gods or kings. There is a third isolated party here, the wood elves. They live in the gray forests, and they don't really have anything else said about them. But the fact that they are kind of snooty on their own, removed from the conflict, that's really sort of a token-esque thing. The elves in The Lord of the Rings, if any of you guys are fans, know that their time has passed, and so they're really handing things off to the other inhabitants of Middle Earth. So really, really a Lord of the Rings spoof here, but so much fun. Now imagine this world like a giant compass. That's how we're going to navigate as I take you through this visual journey with my words. And we're going to use that good old phrase, never eat soggy waffles, north, east, south, and west. To the north part of our compass, there is a sea, there is a harbor, there are slave traders that trade slaves for treasure that's mined out of the sea or something of that sort. Then going to the east of our compass, this is where the battle happens, and it happens once a week. Once a week, the armies of good fight the realm of darkness armies, and then they go back to their respective locations, and then it's all done again. So that happens on the east front of the Great Battle Camp. South is where the Gray Forest is, where those stingy, standoff elves live. And then to the west is a parsnip field. And if you've never heard of a parsnip is a root vegetable very closely related to carrots or parsley. And it seems that the orcs are trying to grow these, and it's not going very well. And in the center of your compass, this is where the goblin spawning pits are. And this is a great launching point for where your adventure begins and also the lives of your goblins. We do want to give credit where credit is due, and the inhabitants that were drawn in this book, the artwork for the book, was done by John Morris with additional artwork by Tim Wilkinson, Lewis, and Lauren Iguanamouth. Yes, you heard me right, Iguanamouth Dawson. There is a reptilian story there. If I had a cool reptilian title, it might be Clint .scheirer. Don't know what a dewlap is? Go and look it up. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with territorial boundaries and mating season. Ay, chihuahua. Now, there's obviously goblins in the Great Battle Camp, but who else? We've heard about the wizards. There are also orcs, hobgoblins, and bugbears. So we're going to survey each one in all of their goofy glory. All right, let's start with the namesake of Goblin Quest, the goblins. To me in this game, they look like deformed gremlin pigs with rabbit-like ears. They have an average lifespan of about a week or less. They are supposed to be very delicious to all creatures and monstrosities that would eat a goblin. They are created by wizards magically. They're imprinted genetically to know the memories and thoughts of other goblins in their clutch, which is about 5 to 15 goblins that are spawned at the same time as them. They kind of have like a hive mind with others in their clutch, which is really great mechanically for later on. They are not intelligent. This makes them the absolute perfect cannon fodder when they go to battle every week with the realm of darkness and the armies of good. They're going to eat almost anything like you would expect a goblin to. And lastly, they are evidently light and aerodynamic, perfect for throwing, possibly by the orc brethren that they go to battle with. And the masterminds behind controlling the goblins and all the other forces of the realm of darkness, we have the wizards. In short, wizards are old-looking men. Maybe there are female wizards, but the art in the book actually just shows old men with mustaches and possibly some goatees. They have weird deformities and alien body parts as a effect of using their magic. They can fly with magical robes that suck air through the bottom of the robes and allow them to fly through the air. They have magic wands that have spells. They are deathly afraid of gnomes, which is a fun kind of quirky weakness that any player or possibly if you play with a GM would be able to go and put into the story. Their Black Tower, which really makes me think of the Black Tower from Lord of the Rings in Mordor, where the eye of Sauron is burning brightly, watching all in its path. The Black Tower, where they live, has teleportation abilities for them to move throughout the battle camp and elsewhere. And the only way to destroy a wizard is to destroy its phylactery. The phylactery is something that you might have known if you've ever played any Dungeons and Dragons and fought a lich. Liches have part of their soul put into an object. And once that object is destroyed, then the part of the soul can be destroyed. Kind of like Voldemort in Horcruxes or any of those other sort of my soul is not in my body and you can't destroy me, but I put it in an object which I could just leave lying around anywhere, and if somebody destroys it, I'm toast. So maybe these wizards are really smart, maybe not, but they are in charge of the Great Battle Camp. And next up, we got orcs. Now, these orcs with the artwork look something like out of He-Man and maybe the Thing from Fantastic Four. They padlock their armor to their bodies so it can't be stolen once they have enough money to afford it, and it's clobbering time. So much so that they worship the god of hitting things, Bog al-Kuruk, appropriately, and they view goblins as their tiny cousins, though they very quickly and easily kill goblins because they show affection by punching and kicking, which means dead goblins. They are hardcore stupid, so much so that no sort of mind control can affect them because their minds are mush, and they are really hardcore strong. They can lift horses or a horse above their head, and if they were all to put their minds together, which, like we said, their minds are mush, they could really destroy just about anything. And on to the hobgoblins. These guys look like slightly elongated pickles with ears and eyes. They were so boring they got kicked out of the fairy realm. When they get angry, so angry, they shoot witch fire out of their eyes, which is kind of troubling for the very squishy goblins. They worship documentation. You give them the right documentation, you might be able to get away with anything. They have lots of glasses for reading and looking and examining all of their documentation. And the thicker the eyeglasses, the more successful the hobgoblin. Lastly, this last part could be a really awesome quest hook. They have hidden feet, mystery feet. Nobody has ever seen the feet of a hobgoblin, and it's assumed that they are very embarrassing and grotesque. So possibly your goblins could be the first one to get a peek. And last and probably certainly least reputable of those in the Great Battle Camp, you have the Bugbears. They look like bipedal dog people. They kidnap and enslave demons to use those demons' magic to be even more tricky and sneaky. And they are very good at the art of crooked gambling. They will cheat each other out of money and booze and then stab each other to get it all back. They're also known to brew very dangerous liquor that might turn you blind, but if you need a contraband item, smuggling it into the Great Battle Camp from anywhere outside of the Great Battle Camp, they're your people. They also have tunnels underneath the Dun Inn, which is where they reside, that really connect every part of the Great Battle Camp. Just got to think twice before sending your goblins down there, though, because it is rumored that they have pit-fighting dogs that roam and range throughout all of those tunnels. Your goblins might be their next snack. Besides the peoples of the Great Battle Camp, the locations within also make it very easy to jump right in with a schema that is familiar to fantasy lovers. Common fantasy tropes like the tall dark tower, that is similar to Stephen King's Dark Tower series, or Orthanc from Lord of the Rings, or the tower in Mordor. You also have the gates of war that show up in a lot of different fantasy books, as well as the iconic inn. The Dun Inn is where the Bugbears live, but D&D often has a joke, a reoccurring joke among players and GMs alike, where all adventures begin at a pub or an inn. You also have some goofy and just plain interesting locations, I assume made for adventure hooks in themselves. The Big Plug, two opposing wells, the Slime Lake, the dilapidated Fairy Grove, the Magical Explosion Testing Ground, Haunted Dwarf Mine, and Goblin Mud Pits, as well as the Throne of the Goblin King that looks like an outhouse. There's also some not-so-interesting locations that can become interesting if you give it just the right creative finesse, like Junk Pile or Filth Pile or Garbage Pile. Why are these labeled on the map? Well, maybe there are more to these locations than meets the eye. The map is quirky, has some really well-labeled locations, and it's ambiguous enough that it really lends itself to some fun and interesting plot hooks. Recently, I had the pleasure of being able to run this game for 4 to 5 players, including myself, and the map was so much fun. It was an integral part of our gameplay, and so instead of just having a printed version of the map at our seats, I found the ability to print off a PDF version of the map into a poster. Using Scotch tape, I was able to tape the poster together after printing it out. I went elementary school style, got some colored markers, some colored pencils. I used a permanent marker to retrace over some of the wording on the map to make it nice and clear. I'll make sure that I put it up on the Discord for anybody to be able to see. I'll pin it up there and you can enjoy my map in all of its glory. When playing the game, I actually did tape my map up on the wall so that my players were able to see it, interact with it, and draw inspiration directly from the map into the game. What transpired with us is that big plug location, they couldn't get around it. They saw it, and that was the first thing that they wanted to do. They wanted to pull the big plug and jump into what they thought was going to be a hole once they pulled the plug out. They came up with an elaborate plan to try to figure out how to create a pulley system to pull the plug out, and it got super psychedelic, weird, and awesome. Now, you can do what I did and create a little bit of manipulatives, such as printing the map. Maybe you want to do a little pre-game homework, or just throw your players in blind and do it all theater of the mind, which is a term for GMs that just means it's all talking in your imagination. You don't need to use any actual physical copies if you don't want to. So next time, it's all about character creation. What are your goblins' names, and what can they do within the Goblin Quest world? If this is your first episode you've listened to, welcome to the pod. Don't forget, if you'd like to get your own copy of Goblin Quest to follow along step by step, I'm going to put that link in the show notes. And I only promote products or services that I have investigated and feel can deliver value to you, such as Goblin Quest. Join us in 2 weeks as we continue our quest, claiming Goblin Quest. It's finally time to bring our tiny little goblins into existence within the world of the Great Battle Camp. Can't get enough? Subscribe to our show through the podcast listening application of your choice and leave us a banging review, whether it be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Go to visit our website at www.clint.scheirer.com, where you can listen to episodes, sign up for exclusive fan-based emails, and find access to our Discord server, Claim to Game, or find us on Patreon. Feel free to send any feedback, thoughts, or suggestions to clint.scheirer@claimtogamepodcast.com. And until next time we make our claim to game, one game at a time.